YouTube, Niner Empire, about 4 days removed now from Super Bowl 58 and that loss. It hasn't got much better. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I think just knowing how good this team was, knowing that this team will never be as good as it was, makes it that much harder to kind of go through. But at the end of the day, man, I said this in the immediate reaction video following Super Bowl 58, but this team will never be as good as it was this year. There just wasn't enough plays made from our playmakers, Debo and Ayuk and Kittle. None of those guys really showed up to par. We didn't get enough out of star players. Now, defense, I thought they showed up. I mean, there was a couple, obviously on the last drive where the Chiefs had the ball. They didn't play up to par, but the defense played about as good as they could against Mahomes, and to fall short in the manner that we did, it sucks. It's going to for a long time again, but at the end of the day, what do you do, right? There's nothing that's going to really make this loss any better. I know time will heal, but I'm not satisfied with how the season went, to be completely honest. I thought the Niners could have played much better throughout the entire season. I'm never going to be satisfied with the season unless we win a Super Bowl, because I know the magnitude of this roster and I know how talented the players are on this team. But to get as close as we did and to not finish the job once again, for the third time in the last 12 years, it's brutal. This loss in particularly, though, the worst loss I think I'll ever have to get over. But at the end of the day, man, we can talk about what if this happened and what if that happened, but none of that matters. We simply just didn't move the ball offensively well when we needed to most. I thought Brock Purdy played his butt off. I thought he was one of the best players on the 49ers in that entire game. But Debo was very underwhelming. Brandon Ayuk was underwhelming. He was just okay, I thought. And then George Kittle, 4 total yards on 2 catches. It just can't happen. We need more out of this offense when we're playing a guy like Patrick Mahomes, and we didn't get that, and that's simply what the loss is on. It's on nothing. You can't really point at somebody in particular and kind of blame this on them, because it's not on one person. It was a team loss. We simply didn't get enough out of some of the players, and that's that. And sometimes you have that. And it sucks. Again, I'm still not over this loss. I'm not going to be. Not even by next season. I'll never get over this loss. And I don't think I'll ever be satisfied with a Super Bowl win unless it's against Patrick Mahomes. And I could be wrong. That may be an overreaction. I don't know. But that's kind of how I feel right now. But yeah, man, and then, I'm sure you guys have seen the stuff with Brandon Ayuk, but, not even a couple days removed from the Super Bowl, he starts putting out cryptic messages on his Instagram. His brother puts out a message about how, this is why we're leaving San Francisco. Brandon Ayuk didn't get enough action in the game. His wife then puts out a video the day that they were cleaning out their locker, saying that this is the last time that we could potentially be at Levi's Stadium. And I think that's all kind of a stunt just to put more pressure on the 49ers front office to pay him. And I think he should be paid. Brandon Ayuk had the best season of his career. But yeah, man, again, we just didn't make enough plays, and that's what it came down to. We didn't get enough out of our star players. And it sucks to know that was the reason why we lost, but there's nothing else to it. Kansas City made more plays when it mattered. Kittle, Ayuk, Debo were pretty much non-factors. Kittle and Debo were getting clamped up all game long. And that was that, man. Like, there's nothing else to it. But the 49ers have lost way more coaches than I think anybody could have seen coming. Obviously, the biggest news is that we fired defensive coordinator Steve Wilks, or Kyle Shanahan in particularly fired Steve Wilks, and this happened yesterday. Never was a good fit, I don't think. A lot of people are questioning why it happened and that he wasn't the reason that they lost the Super Bowl, and that's true. Like, I think Steve Wilks outcoached Kyle Shanahan in the Super Bowl, but at the end of the day, when Kyle Shanahan's got to call a timeout in overtime because of a defensive coverage that Steve Wilks is calling, it's bad. Wilks in this organization were never on the same page. When Wilks was brought in, the 49ers basically told him, like, look, this is what you're running. Adapt to what we do. It was never we hired Steve Wilks and he brought in his system. Like, he was trying to learn our system, which when you have to do that, it's easy to say that it was never a good fit in the beginning. So Kyle obviously fires Steve Wilks yesterday, which I'm not mad at that move whatsoever. I don't think Steve Wilks, our run defense was a bottom 10 unit in the league towards the end of the year. The run defense was historically bad. Not historically bad, but it shouldn't have been as bad as it was. And he relied too much on the corners. And, when it comes to the Niners defense, you have to revolve your defense around the defensive line. D'Amico did it. Saleh did it. At the end of the day, it is what it is. I don't think that was a good fit. I'm fine with that move. But Kyle's got to get a guy in there that is familiar with the system that this team wants to run and that excels in doing so. And who that will be, I don't know. Just to list a couple of guys off, maybe Mike Vrabel. I've vouched for defensive line coach Chris Kosirik to get a shot at defensive coordinator. I do know that he is very passionate about the defensive line, and that's kind of his thing. So I don't know if he would make that jump to defensive coordinator, but I would love that move if they ended up doing it. Obviously, Pete Carroll's out there. Bill Belichick is out there. I seen somebody say Brandon Staley. I think it may have been Mike Silver that mentioned something about Brandon Staley. I do not want Brandon Staley on this coaching staff whatsoever. And if that happens, that is very bad news for the Niners because Brandon Staley was fired from the Chargers for the exact reason that, for one, he couldn't win football games and his defense was probably the worst in the league. So I do not want Brandon Staley. Preferably for me, I think it should be Vrabel. Maybe they should promote within. I don't know. Anybody but Brandon Staley I'm fine with. Hopefully, my number one option would be Mike Vrabel, personally. I think he would be a perfect fit. Obviously, don't know if he would want to make that regression to defensive coordinator after not getting, a head coaching role. I've seen a lot of people talking about Wink Martindale as well. He took a job with Michigan, but there's no doubt in my mind that if the Niners called, he would probably give up that role to take the Niners defensive coordinator role. A lot of names out there to fill. Obviously, we'll kind of, monitor how that situation goes. But as I said, though, Kyle Shanahan confirmed the departures of 4 assistant coaches, all of which had already been reported. Assistant offensive line coach James Craig got the O-line job with the Raiders. Assistant defensive line coach Darryl Tapp became the new defensive line coach at Washington. And the assistant head coach and running backs coach this year, Anthony Lynn, is going to be the run game coordinator at Washington. And then, of course, we've already, reported on and talked about Clint Kubiak, the 49ers offensive passing game specialist, is taking the job with the New Orleans Saints as their offensive coordinator. So the 49ers must fill those roles, find a replacement for Steve Wilks. It's obviously going to be interesting to see which direction Kyle goes with those decisions. But that is currently what we know about the coaching departures and whatnot. We lost a lot more than I thought, and a lot of people talked about how Adam Peters leaving wasn't going to be that big of a deal. It was, man. Like, not only is he a great executive, and not only did he help build this roster to what it currently is today, but when guys like that leave, man, they take a lot of their, former coaches on the team that they were with before, and that's what we're seeing with Adam Peters. I mean, he's taken 2 or 3 of the 49ers assistant coaches from this year to the Commanders with him. So, again, I think the most notable departure was Clint Kubiak. I think the 49ers can fill the other roles just fine without, anything. But Steve Wilks being fired, there's some mixed feelings on that. I know a lot of people think that, he was the reason that the Niners were in the Super Bowl to begin with and that he outcoached Kyle, and I'm not going to argue against that because I agree with that. I do think he outcoached Kyle in the Super Bowl. I think he had the defense prepared, but it never was a good fit, let's be honest. I mean, everybody complaining about Steve Wilks being fired isn't 49ers fans, and I think all of 49ers fans realize that, with the run defense being as bad as it was, and just knowing that, and seeing how it wasn't a good fit, the move makes sense. I'm not going to sit up here and complain about Steve Wilks leaving. We can definitely get somebody in here that understands this defense more, that will do better with this defense. And Kyle Shanahan commented on Steve Wilks leaving, and he basically said, the struggles that we had to endure with the defense shouldn't have been as hard as it was, and it's true. The defense was very bad against the run, which is something that I haven't seen over the past 2-3 years with D'Amico and Saleh. And again, man, knowing that this defense was as good as it was, but it struggled so badly against the run, it should have never happened. So again, I think the Niners will definitely hire somebody that's more fit for this defense. Again, I think Steve Wilks is a great coach. Don't get me wrong. I just don't think defensive coordinator wise, he could have came to this defense and did what D'Amico and Saleh did. He just doesn't specialize in a defense like the 49ers. He's definitely more of a defensive backs coach. That's kind of his background all in all. And he wanted to rely on these DBs more than I think he wanted to rely on this defensive line. And you can't do that as the 49ers defensive coordinator. I mean, with as much money as we have in this defensive line is what makes this defense as good as it is. And it just never was a good fit, man. It never was a good fit. So, again, it'll be interesting to see who he brings in, who he examines as potential candidates after Wilks' departure. But, so that's what we know so far about the coaching moves and whatnot. It's interesting, too, because Kyle Shanahan on Monday, I believe, or maybe it was Tuesday following the Super Bowl, he did an end-of-season recap, and he talked about how he thinks that every assistant coach this year, he expected to be back, he said. But it seems like he slept on it, and he felt that Steve Wilks wasn't the best fit, and I knew that. I mean, everybody knew that. Again, everybody complaining about this firing isn't a 49ers fan. I think every 49ers fan that I have kind of seen on Twitter talking about this move is fine with this move. I mean, it just simply never was the best fit. Now, a lot of people were labeling him as the scapegoat. I can see why some would say that, but at the end of the day, like, he didn't do what Kyle and this coaching staff envisioned him doing with this defense. I seen Josina Anderson of The Athletic, I believe, or maybe CBS Sports now. Yeah, she's a senior NFL insider of CBS Sports now. She tweeted out yesterday and said, "How do you go from being a Super Bowl participating defensive coordinator to losing a game-changing player, to holding the Chiefs to without a touchdown until 2:28 remained in the third quarter, to being relieved of duties, to having no chair currently available as a defensive coordinator elsewhere?" And what I would have to say to that is just maybe if you paid attention at any point in the season, you know, it would be, I know it's, you know, kind of hard for people to envision this, but I think even if the 49ers did win the Super Bowl, the Niners were probably going to move on from him. There were problems on his defense all year long. There were also players on the defense that had problems with him. I mean, you look back at the midway point in the season to Steve Wilks making the change from being up in the press box calling plays to you know, being on the defense or being on the sideline and calling plays. Like, there were always some issue with Steve Wilks, and I just never thought that it was the best fit. And that's fine. You know, they clearly got that hire wrong, but you know, I think at the end of the day, they just have to go out and get somebody that will have more success with this defense. They just have to go out and get somebody that understands that this defense starts with the line and not the defensive backs. There was a report today also that said that some people in league circles think that the 49ers will end up making Brandon Staley, the former Chargers head coach, their next defensive coordinator. I don't know how I feel about that, to be honest. I don't like Brandon Staley at all. He was a good defensive coordinator. Then he became one of the worst head coaches probably of all time. But I would hope that they are very thorough in their search and the entire process if they do decide to hire him. And if they have a very thorough process and they believe that Brandon Staley is the best fit, I'll probably support it. I don't want that move to happen, though. I don't want Brandon Staley. But if that's what Kyle believes will be the best fit amongst some of the candidates out there, so be it. I'm not going to argue that. So, yeah, man. Other than that, that's pretty much all I got. Obviously, let me know how you guys are feeling about, you know, the Super Bowl loss 4 days removed. A lot of people blaming the refs and this and that. I mean, were the refs perfect? Absolutely not. But I think for the most part, you know, there isn't a whole lot that I have problems with. I mean, Nick Bosa was getting held a lot in the game. Fred Warner was basically tackled on a play in overtime where Mahomes threw a crosser to Rashee Rice. He was pretty much tackled and they didn't call it. So a lot of different, like, situations in the game where the refs could have been better, absolutely. But I think this was a pretty clean game, I thought, overall. You know, the 49ers were bailed out in overtime on a holding call by Trent McDuffie. I mean, were the tackles on Kansas City holding a lot? Absolutely, but you can't call it every play. And I'm not going to be one to sit up here and say that the reason we lost is the refs. I'm not trying to make any excuses to why we lost, because at the end of the day, no matter how bad people think the refs were, the Niners had a chance to win that game, and they didn't capitalize on multiple opportunities, on multiple possessions where they went 3 and out. And had they scored points, this game probably doesn't even go to overtime, and this game probably ends with Brock Purdy taking a couple knees to win the Super Bowl. So we can go on and on about the refs and, you know, the offensive line holding penalties, and how the Chiefs have the most holding calls in the NFL by a wide margin. It is a little interesting that the Chiefs were called with no holding calls whatsoever. Definitely think that's a little odd. But again, at the end of the day, man, like, we had a chance to win the game. I didn't think the refs were that bad. But I'm sick and tired of seeing people going on about how about how, they're like, it seems like people have this weird obsession over the amount of offensive line holding calls in the Super Bowl. It's like, it's not called a lot, to no surprise, right? Like, they don't call a lot of holding calls in the Super Bowl. But at the end of the day, like, there were multiple opportunities for the 49ers to take advantage of drives offensively, and they just didn't. So it is what it is, but I would imagine by now Kyle Shanahan is well into his defensive coordinator search. It's a very desirable job. The core talent that ranked number 1 defensively in 2022 is there. Obviously, a chance to pair it with 2023's number 1 offense means, it could be a candidate's ideal opportunity. So I would expect a lot of people to be interested in this role. Obviously, I would, without a doubt, expect it to be a thorough search and all of that. But yeah, man. Also, can't believe the Dre Greenlaw stuff either, man. Like, that was so gut-wrenching to watch, to see that he tore his Achilles. To see that he just tore his Achilles in the manner that he did is just, it sucks. Obviously, hopefully a speedy recovery to him, and all of that. Something to keep on the lookout for is the 49ers could be eyeballing a potential move to bring back Azeez Al-Shaair, who just played out his contract with the Titans. He could immediately come back to this defense, and Azeez Al-Shaair was one of the more underrated players on the 49ers during his time. Great linebacker. He's great in coverage, great against the run. And, when Greenlaw was hurt, Azeez Al-Shaair came in multiple times and held up his end of the bargain well. He's a beast at linebacker. He's liked by his former teammates, and it would be a huge lift for this defense if they could do this in free agency, to bring Azeez Al-Shaair back, and because who knows when Greenlaw is going to be able to play, right? Like, he may take a page out of Rodgers' book. He may, he may be in a situation where he can start week 1. I don't know yet. Obviously, something that we're going to have to continue to monitor. But knowing that he got hurt in the Super Bowl, the last game of the year, all the way in February, it makes me hard to believe that he's going to be ready to go for the opening of the season. But we'll see what happens again. So, obviously, let me know how you guys are feeling 4 days removed from the Super Bowl. Let me know how you guys feel about all these coaching moves. But yeah, man, as always, go Niners. I'll continue to keep you guys updated, of course. I'm going to, start brainstorming ideas and video ideas for the offseason. But yeah, as always, go Niners, and I'll see you guys in the next one.